The morning sun rose lazily over Umuahia, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and gold. The lush green landscapes stretched as far as the eye could see, dotted with towering palm trees and modest homes that spoke of the simple yet dignified life of the town's inhabitants. Here, in this serene corner of Abia State, Nigeria, lived a young man whose heart burned with an unwavering dream. Arani stood before the mirror in his modest room, adjusting his collar for the 5th time that morning. His hands trembled slightly as he held another military recruitment form, the crisp paper a stark contrast to his weathered fingers. At 28, he had already submitted 4 applications to join the Nigerian army, each rejection cutting deeper than the last. "Brother, you're going to wear out that mirror if you keep staring at it," came a teasing voice from the doorway. Arini turned to find his younger brother, Chukwudi, leaning against the doorframe with a knowing smile. At 22, Chukwudi had grown into a handsome young man, thanks in large part to Arini's sacrifices and guidance after their parents' passing. "You think this is funny, eh?" Arini tried to sound stern, but couldn't hide his own smile. When you're trying to impress the military board, every detail matters. Chukwudi crossed the room and straightened his brother's collar himself. "The military board? Or is it because you're meeting Kioma later?" The mention of his fiancée brought a warm glow to Arini's face. "Both, actually. I'm dropping off this application, then meeting her to discuss wedding preparations." "Ah, the 2 great loves of your life, the army and Kioma." Chukwudi's voice grew serious. "Brother, why do you keep trying? This is the 5th time. Maybe God is telling you something." Arini sat on his bed, patting the space beside him. Chukwudi joined him, and for a moment they sat in comfortable silence, the way they often did when important words needed to be said. "Do you remember father's uniform?" Arini finally spoke, his voice soft with memory. Chukwudi nodded. "The one mother kept pressed and hanging in their room. Of course, you used to stand before it for hours when you thought no one was watching." That uniform represented everything our father stood for: duty, honor, service to our nation. Arini's eyes took on a distant look. When he wore it, he stood taller, prouder. He wasn't just our father, he was Nigeria's protector. "But father died in that uniform," Chukwudi reminded him gently. "He died serving his country, protecting the people he loved." Arini turned to face his brother. "That's not a reason to turn away from service, it's a reason to embrace it. Someone needs to stand guard to protect our people, our way of life. And that someone has to be you. It's in my blood, Chukwudi, just as taking care of you was in my blood after we lost them." Arini stood, walking to the window. The morning sun had fully risen now, and the streets were coming alive with vendors setting up their stalls, children heading to school, and the daily rhythm of Umuahia beginning its familiar dance. "You've already done so much," Chukwudi protested. "You raised me, put me through school, worked every job you could find to keep food on our table. Now you have Kioma, a chance at your own family. Why risk all that?" Arini turned back to his brother, his expression resolute. "Because some dreams don't die, no matter how many times they're denied. They become part of who you are." Before Chukwudi could respond, a knock at their front door interrupted their conversation. Arini quickly gathered his papers and straightened his clothes one final time. "That'll be Mazi Okonkwo," he said, referring to their elderly neighbor who had promised to drive him to the recruitment office. "We'll continue this conversation later, okay?" Chukwudi nodded, watching as his brother hurried to answer the door. As Arini's footsteps faded, Chukwudi whispered a prayer for his brother's dream to finally come true, even as worry gnawed at his heart. The drive to the recruitment office was filled with Mazi Okonkwo's attempts at cheerful conversation. But Arini's mind was elsewhere. He mentally reviewed his application, the additional certificates he'd earned since his last attempt, the physical training he'd undertaken to ensure he met all requirements. "You know," Mazi Okonkwo said as they approached the office, "your father would be proud of your persistence." Arini smiled gratefully at the old man. "Thank you, sir. I hope so. I knew him well, you know. We served together briefly before I retired. The old man's voice carried the weight of memories. He always said the measure of a soldier isn't in how many battles he wins, but in how many times he gets up after being knocked down. These words stayed with Arani as he entered the recruitment office, his heart pounding but his steps steady. The office was already bustling with activity, young men and women clutching their own dreams in manila envelopes and nervous smiles. "Next," called a stern-faced woman at the reception desk. Arini approached, placing his application carefully on the counter. "Good morning, Ma. I'm here to submit my application for the Army recruitment program." The woman barely looked up as she began processing his paperwork. "Name?" "Arini Okoro." Her fingers paused over her keyboard, and she finally looked at him properly. "Okoro? This is your 5th application, isn't it?" Arini stood straighter. "Yes, Ma, it is." "Most people give up after the 2nd rejection," she remarked, studying him with new interest. "I'm not most people, Ma. My father taught me that service to one's nation is the highest calling. I intend to answer that call, no matter how many attempts it takes." Something in his voice must have impressed her, because her stern expression softened slightly. "Well, Mr. Okoro, I hope for your sake that the 5th time's the charm. We'll contact you within 3 weeks regarding your application." Arini thanked her and left the office, his heart lighter despite the uncertainty ahead. Outside, Mazi Okonkwo waited patiently in his old Peugeot. "All done?" the old man asked as Arini slid into the passenger seat. "Yes, sir. Now we wait." Again. Arini checked his watch. "Would you mind dropping me at the market? I'm meeting Kioma to discuss wedding preparations." The mention of Kioma brought a knowing smile to Mazi Okonkwo's face. "Ah, young love. Your Kioma is a good woman, Arini. Patient and understanding, qualities needed in a soldier's wife." As they drove toward the market, Arini's thoughts turned to Kioma. They had met 2 years ago at a church youth program, and from the moment he saw her, he knew she was different. Unlike other women who had dismissed his military ambitions as foolish persistence, Kioma understood his dream. She saw beyond the repeated rejections to the heart of what drove him. The market was alive with activity when they arrived. Vendors called out their wares, haggling customers created a symphony of negotiations, and the air was rich with the scents of fresh produce and spices. Arini spotted Kioma immediately. She stood out in her yellow dress, her natural beauty drawing admiring glances from passers-by. "My love," she called out when she saw him, her face lighting up with a smile that never failed to make his heart skip a beat. Arini thanked Mazi Okonkwo and made his way to her, weaving through the crowd. When he reached her, she pulled him into a warm embrace, ignoring the playful teasing from nearby market women. "How did it go?" she asked, studying his face for signs of how the application submission had gone. "Smooth enough," he replied, taking her hand as they began walking through the market. "Now we wait." Again. Kioma squeezed his hand encouragingly. "This time will be different. I can feel it." They spent the next hour selecting items for their traditional wedding ceremony, discussing prices with vendors, and making lists of what they still needed. Despite the joy of planning their future together, Arini could sense something weighing on Kioma's mind. "What's troubling you?" he asked as they sat down at Mama Nkechi's food stall for lunch. Kioma played with her jollof rice for a moment before speaking. "I was thinking, if you get accepted this time, what happens to our plans? The military training, it would mean postponing everything, wouldn't it?" Arini reached across the table to take her hand. "I know it's not ideal timing, but if I'm accepted, we'll make it work. We can have a simple ceremony before I leave for training." "No," Kioma interrupted firmly. "If we're getting married, we're doing it properly. With all the ceremonies, all the traditions, our families deserve that much." "But that means waiting until after my training," Arini said slowly, watching her face. Kioma nodded, a brave smile on her face. "Then we'll wait. Your dream is part of who you are, Arini. I knew that when I fell in love with you. I'm not asking you to choose between your dream and our marriage. I'm just asking that we do both right." Before Arini could respond, a commotion near the market entrance caught their attention. A group of people were gathering, voices raised in excitement. Curious, they made their way over to see what was happening. A tall, distinguished-looking man in military dress was making his way through the market, accompanied by several younger officers. The crowd parted respectfully, and Arini felt his heart race as he recognized the insignia of a high-ranking officer. "That's Colonel Ezeka," someone whispered nearby. "He's just been posted to oversee the local recruitment center." Arini stood straighter, unable to take his eyes off the officer. This was the man who would ultimately have a say in whether his application was successful. As if sensing his gaze, Colonel Ezeki turned slightly, his eyes meeting Arini's for a brief moment. "Go," Kioma whispered, giving him a gentle push. "Introduce yourself." "What? No, I couldn't." "You couldn't? The Arini I know would never let an opportunity like this pass." Her eyes sparkled with challenge. "Or have you suddenly become shy?" Drawing a deep breath, Arini squared his shoulders and made his way toward the colonel. He waited respectfully until there was a break in the officer's conversation with his subordinates. "Sir," Arini said, standing at attention the way his father had taught him, "permission to introduce myself." Colonel Ezeka turned, studying him with intelligent eyes. "Granted, at ease, young man." "My name is Arini Okoro, sir. I submitted my application to join the army this morning." Arini's voice was steady despite his racing heart. "My father served under Colonel Musa in the 82nd Division before his passing." Recognition flickered in the colonel's eyes. "Okoro? Lieutenant James Okoro's son?" "Yes, sir." The colonel's stern expression softened slightly. "I knew your father, a good man and an excellent soldier. He died honorably in service to his country." "Thank you, sir. I hope to follow in his footsteps." Colonel Ezeka studied him more closely. "This isn't your first application, is it?" "No, sir. It's my fifth." Instead of the dismissal or skepticism Arini expected, the colonel smiled. "Persistence. That's a quality we value in the military. Tell me, young man, do you have any experience in farming?" The question caught Arini off guard. "Yes, sir. I've worked various jobs to support my younger brother, including farm work." "Good. I have a farm on the outskirts of town. I need reliable workers who understand the value of discipline and hard work." The colonel pulled out a card and handed it to Arini. "Come see me tomorrow morning. We'll discuss employment while your application is being processed." Arini's hands trembled slightly as he accepted the card. "Thank you, sir. I won't disappoint you." As the colonel moved on, Kioma appeared at Arini's side, her face glowing with excitement. "See, God works in mysterious ways." That evening, as Arini shared the news with Chukwudi over dinner, his younger brother's initial skepticism began to fade. "So this colonel, he knew our father?" Chukwudi asked, helping himself to more soup. "Yes, and he's offering me work on his farm while my application is being processed." Arini could hardly contain his excitement. "Don't you see, Chukwudi? This could be the chance I've been waiting for." "Just promise me one thing, brother," Chukwudi said seriously. "Promise me you won't let this opportunity make you forget about taking care of yourself. You're always looking after everyone else. Me, Kioma, your dreams of service. Sometimes I worry." Arini reached across the table to clasp his brother's shoulder. "Hey, you're my brother. Taking care of you isn't a burden, it's a privilege. Father and mother would have wanted us to look after each other." As they cleared the dinner dishes, a knock at the door surprised them. It was Kioma, holding a covered dish. "I made your favorite," she announced, unveiling a steaming plate of pounded yam and agusi soup, "to celebrate today's developments." The three of them sat together, sharing the meal and their hopes for the future. In that moment, watching his brother and fiancée laugh together, Arini felt truly blessed. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he had the support of the two people he loved most in the world. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Arini rose before the sun, prepared himself carefully, and made his way to Colonel Ezeka's farm. The property was larger than he expected, with neat rows of crops stretching into the distance. The colonel was already there, dressed in work clothes rather than his uniform. "Ah, Okoro, right on time, military punctuality. I like that." For the next several hours, they worked side by side in the fields. The colonel asked questions about Aruni's life, his previous applications, his family. As they worked, Aruni found himself opening up about his dreams and struggles. "Sir," he said during a water break, "may I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "What made you choose the military life?" Colonel Ezekiel was quiet for a moment, considering the question. "You know, when I was your age, I had other opportunities. My father wanted me to become a lawyer, but I saw something in the military that I couldn't find anywhere else. A chance to be part of something bigger than myself, to serve not just my own interests, but the interests of my nation and my people." Aruni nodded eagerly. "That's exactly how I feel, sir, but 5 rejections." "Let me tell you something, Okoro. The military isn't just looking for strong bodies or sharp minds. We're looking for resilient spirits, men and women who don't give up when faced with obstacles." The colonel wiped sweat from his brow. "Your persistence in applying, that shows me more about your character than any physical test could." "Thank you, sir. That means a lot coming from you." "Now, about your application," the colonel said, his tone becoming businesslike. "I can't promise you anything. That wouldn't be fair or proper. But I can help you prepare better for the selection process. Are you willing to work hard?" "Yes, sir." "Absolutely, sir." "Good, because I'm not just offering you farm work. I'm offering you a chance to learn. Every morning, before we start work, we'll train. Physical fitness, military knowledge, everything you need to know. By the time your application is reviewed, you'll be more prepared than any other candidate." Aruni could hardly believe his ears. "Sir, I don't know how to thank you." "Thank me by not wasting this opportunity. Now tell me about this wedding I hear you're planning." As the weeks passed, Aruni fell into a new routine. Early mornings were spent training with Colonel Ezeke, learning military protocols, improving his physical fitness, and absorbing every bit of knowledge the older man shared. Then came the farm work, followed by evenings split between wedding preparations with Kioma and studying military materials the colonel provided. Kioma proved to be endlessly supportive, often bringing meals to the farm and helping with lighter tasks while discussing their future together. Her presence became a welcome sight not just for Aruni but for Colonel Ezekiel as well, who saw in their relationship the same devotion he shared with his own wife of 30 years. One particularly hot afternoon, as they took shelter under the shade of a mango tree, Colonel Ezekiel watched the young couple sharing a meal. "Your fiancée reminds me of my Elizabeth," he remarked, accepting a bowl of jollof rice from Kioma. She too understood that loving a soldier means loving the service as well. Kioma smiled warmly. "It's not always easy, sir, but when you love someone, you love all of them, their dreams included." The colonel nodded approvingly. "That's wisdom beyond your years, my dear." As the weeks turned into months, Aruni's transformation became evident to everyone. His body grew stronger from the combination of farm work and military training. His knowledge of military protocols and history deepened through evening studies. Even his posture changed, taking on the natural authority of a soldier in training. Chukwudi noticed these changes in his brother with a mixture of pride and concern. One evening, as they sat on their small veranda watching the sunset, he voiced his thoughts. "You're different now, brother. Stronger, yes. But there's something else, too. You carry yourself like father did." Aruni turned to his younger brother, seeing not the boy he had raised, but the man he had become. "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" "Good," Chukwudi answered without hesitation. "You've always had father's heart, but now you have his bearing too. I think I finally understand why this means so much to you." Before Aruni could respond, they heard the familiar sound of Colonel Ezekiel's vehicle approaching. The colonel rarely visited their home, making his arrival an unexpected surprise. "Sir?" Aruni jumped to his feet, standing at attention out of habit. Colonel Ezekiel waved him to ease, holding an official-looking envelope. "At ease, Okoro. I thought you should hear this from me first." He paused, his face unreadable. "The selection board has reviewed your application." Time seemed to stop as Aruni waited for the next words, his heart pounding in his chest. Chukwudi moved closer, placing a supportive hand on his brother's shoulder. The colonel's stern expression finally broke into a warm smile. "Congratulations, recruiter Koro. You've been accepted into the next training class." The words took a moment to sink in. 5 attempts, countless rejections, years of persistence, and finally, his dream was becoming reality. Arani felt his legs go weak, and for once, he didn't try to maintain his military bearing as tears of joy filled his eyes. "Thank you, sir," he managed to say. "Thank you for everything." "Don't thank me," the colonel replied firmly. "You earned this every step of the way. Your father would be proud, I know I am." As the news spread through their community, celebrations erupted. Mazi Okonkwo organized a small gathering, and the market women who had watched Arani grow up brought dishes to share. But the sweetest moment came when Arani told Kioma, who threw her arms around him with tears streaming down her face. "I told you this time would be different," she whispered in his ear. That night, as the celebrations wound down, Arani stood before his father's old uniform, still hanging in its place of honor. He touched the fabric gently, feeling closer to his father than he had in years. "I made it, father," he whispered. "I'll make you proud." Behind him, Chukwudi cleared his throat. "He was already proud of you, brother. We all are." Arani turned to face his younger brother, the weight of the future heavy but welcome on his shoulders. "Things will change now. The training will be intensive, and then—" "I need you to take care of Kioma while I'm away," Arin said, placing a hand on Chukwudi's shoulder. His voice carried the gravity of the request, tinged with both trust and concern. "She will need all the support she can get, and I know I can count on you to be there for her." His gaze shifted momentarily to the wedding photo on the wall, taken just 6 months ago, showing him and Kioma beaming with the promise of a lifetime together. Chukwudi met his brother's eyes with unwavering determination. At 25, he was still finding his path in life. But if there was one thing he knew with certainty, it was his loyalty to Arin. "I give you my word, brother," he replied, his voice steady and sincere. "I will take care of Kioma as if she were my own sister. I will make sure she lacks nothing and feels supported every step of the way. You can trust me." The bond between the brothers ran deep, forged through years of hardship and sacrifice. As they embraced, Arin felt a profound sense of peace wash over him. The road ahead would be challenging, but knowing his loved ones would be cared for gave him the strength to face whatever lay ahead. The military training would demand his full attention, and he couldn't afford to be distracted by worries about home. As the moon rose over Umuahia that night, Arini lay awake, his mind full of dreams no longer deferred. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now he savored the knowledge that his persistence had finally paid off. His journey to follow in his father's footsteps was just beginning. But with the support of his loved ones and the guidance of mentors like Colonel Ezeike, he felt ready to face whatever lay ahead. In the distance, a lone bugle played the last post, its mournful notes drifting on the evening breeze, a reminder of the service and sacrifice that awaited him, and a calling he was finally ready to answer. The day of departure arrived sooner than anyone expected. The morning air was crisp and clean as Chukwudi and Kioma accompanied Arin to the transit station. The atmosphere was heavy with unspoken emotions as they waited for the transport that would take him to his assigned post in the northern state. Kioma, trying to be strong for her husband, couldn't hold back her tears as the final boarding call echoed through the station. "I'll make you proud," Arin promised, holding his wife close one last time. "This separation is temporary, my love. We'll build a better future together." He turned to Chukwudi, their goodbye weighted with the responsibility they now shared. "Take care of each other," he said simply, knowing no more words were necessary between them. The journey to the northern state was long and arduous, spanning 2 full days as Arin traveled from the familiar eastern region to the far north. The landscape gradually transformed from the lush greenery he knew to arid plains and rugged terrain. With each mile, he felt the physical distance growing between him and his loved ones, but his determination never wavered. Upon arriving at the military camp, Arin found himself in a completely new environment. The routine was rigid, the training demanding, and the culture distinctly different from his home region. Yet his natural adaptability served him well, and he quickly earned the respect of both his superiors and fellow trainees. In quiet moments between drills and duties, his thoughts would drift to Kiyoma and Chukwudi, hoping they were managing well in his absence. Back home, Chukwudi took his responsibilities seriously. He established a routine of regular visits to check on Kiyoma, ensuring she had everything she needed. Arin, true to his word, sent money regularly for household expenses, dividing it between Kiyoma's personal needs and general provisions. He even included extra funds for Chukwudi, knowing his younger brother was still searching for stable employment. Every weekend, like clockwork, Chukwudi would receive the money transfer from Arin. He would then make his way to the local market, carefully selecting the freshest produce, highest quality staples, and necessary household items. He took pride in this task, knowing that his attention to detail would ease his brother's worries and ensure Kiyoma's comfort. As the weeks turned into months, Chukwudi and Kiyoma developed a comfortable familiarity. They would share stories about Arin, finding solace in their shared love for him. Kiyoma appreciated her brother-in-law's dedication, and Chukwudi felt protective of his sister-in-law, viewing her happiness as a sacred trust from his brother. However, 4 months into Arin's deployment, the strain of separation began to show, particularly on Kiyoma. As newlyweds, she and Arin had barely begun their life together before duty called him away. The absence of her husband left a void that grew more pronounced with each passing day. During their phone conversations, Kiyoma would pour out her heart to Arin, expressing her loneliness and longing for his presence. "I miss you so much," she would say, her voice thick with emotion. "The house feels empty without you. When will you come home?" Arin would try to comfort her, sharing his own struggles with the separation while remaining firm in his commitment to service. "Stay strong, my love," he would say. "This sacrifice will be worth it in the end. We're building a future together." One fateful evening, as the rainy season approached, the delicate balance of their lives shifted dramatically. Chukwudi had made his usual visit to deliver supplies, but this time nature had other plans. The sky opened up without warning, releasing a torrential downpour that made travel impossible. Thunder rolled across the sky, and lightning illuminated the windows in brilliant flashes. "You can't go out in this weather," Kiyoma said, concerned for his safety. "Wait until it passes." Chukwudi agreed reluctantly, settling onto the couch in the living room, while Kiyoma retired to her bedroom. As the hours passed and the storm showed no signs of abating, an uncomfortable tension began to build in the house. The combination of isolation, emotional vulnerability, and physical proximity created a dangerous chemistry neither had anticipated. What happened next would haunt them both forever, a moment of weakness that violated every principle of trust and loyalty they held dear. In the aftermath, as the rain continued to pour outside, they were left to grapple with the magnitude of their betrayal. The next morning, Chukwudi fled from the house as soon as the sun rose, his heart heavy with shame and self-loathing. He made a solemn vow never to return to his brother's home, the weight of his guilt too overwhelming to bear. The trust Arin had placed in him, the years of sacrifice and love his brother had shown him, all felt shattered beyond repair. When Arin called to check on them in the following days, Chukwudi couldn't bring himself to answer. The sound of his brother's ringtone sent waves of panic through him, each call a reminder of his unforgivable betrayal. He would stare at the phone, tears streaming down his face, paralyzed by the fear of confronting what he had done. Worried by his brother's unusual silence, Arin persisted in calling. The behavior was so out of character for Chukwudi that it sparked genuine concern. When Chukwudi finally answered, after numerous attempts, his voice trembled as he fabricated excuses about phone troubles and busy schedules. "If you need help, just tell me," Arin said, his voice filled with brotherly concern. "Please don't abandon Kiyoma. Take care of her for me." Each word was like a knife to Chukwudi's heart. He managed to assure his brother that all was well, but the conversation left him feeling even more wretched. The gap between his promise and his actions seemed to widen with each passing day. Meanwhile, Kiyoma struggled with her own torment. The guilt of betraying her husband warred with lingering feelings of loneliness and desire. She found herself drawn to Chukwudi despite knowing the wrongness of their actions. the very forbidden nature of their connection making it more intense. Things took an even more complicated turn when a few weeks later, Kioma began experiencing unusual symptoms. Morning sickness and fatigue led her to visit a local clinic, where her worst fears were confirmed: she was pregnant. The news hit her like a physical blow, the implications sending her mind spinning with panic and dread. How could she possibly explain this to Aaron? The timing would make it clear that the child couldn't be his, given his months of absence. The truth would destroy not only her marriage, but also the brotherhood between Aaron and Chukwudi. The weight of these consequences seemed unbearable. Alone in their marital home, Kioma sat with her hand resting on her stomach, tears flowing freely as she contemplated the future. The life growing inside her, conceived in a moment of weakness, would forever change the dynamics of their family. The foundations of trust and loyalty they had built would crumble once the truth came to light. With trembling hands, she reached for her phone. She knew she had to tell someone, and despite everything, Chukwudi deserved to know. But as she dialed his number, she wondered if any of them would ever recover from the aftermath of that rainy night. What began as a simple act of brotherly faith, asking Chukwudi to care for Kioma, had spiraled into a complex web of betrayal, guilt, and life-altering choices. In the military camp, Aaron continued his training, still believing in the loyalty of his brother and the faithfulness of his wife. He pushed himself harder each day, focusing on becoming the soldier he had always dreamed of being, unaware that the very foundation of his family was crumbling. Chukwudi, consumed by guilt, withdrew from both Kioma and his regular duties. He could no longer face the weekly market trips or the responsibility of caring for his brother's household. He spent his days in isolated misery, replaying the events that had led to this point and searching for a way to atone for his actions. As the sun set on another day in the military camp, Aaron looked at the photo of his wife and brother he kept by his bed, smiling at their happy faces, unaware that the image captured a simpler time that could never be reclaimed. Back home, Kioma and Chukwudi carried the burden of their secret, each wondering if the truth, when it finally emerged, would destroy them all.
Write the word "continue" in the comment section if you want the next part, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed watching. Kindly click the subscribe button, like, comment, and share this video. Watch out for more intriguing and eye-catching videos from your favorite YouTube channel.